All right, welcome to the Coffee with Progressive Suspension. I'm here with John. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
And Dave, thank you as well. And we're kind of hanging out here talking about progressive suspension, learning more about it. And I guess the first question I have for you guys is, most of the time when people are looking at shocks, it's because they are blown out, they're worn down. But outside of that, why should somebody look at upgrading their stock suspension?
Number one, reason to upgrade stock suspension is going to be just to make a better riding and handling bike. The complaint we hear most often is going to be riders having an issue with the bike bottoming out. And, that could be worn shocks, as you mentioned. It could be that, what the manufacturer spec'd out on their motorcycle just wasn't really suited for the type of use they have. Maybe they're two-up touring on a bike that wasn't really a touring bike. They've added bags and so on, and they've got some serious weight on the bike now. So that's one of the biggest reasons is just the upgrade. The second biggest reason is going to be lowering the bike, and we hear that all day long, and that's either for necessity, trying to get your feet on the ground, or just because it looks cool. So.
And I guess we were talking upstairs. I know you guys had mentioned that most shocks cost like $8 from the factory or something like that. I mean, they're super cheap and they don't last very long. How does somebody know that their shock is worn out?
Well, unless the oil is, the oil could be running out of it, then it's obvious. But maybe the bike's handling has deteriorated, and they'll admit it. Sometimes people don't know their bike doesn't handle well anymore, and you've got to talk to the customer about, how's your bike working? How's it riding? Well, that's great. Well, is it as good as it was new? And they'll hesitate. Well, probably not. So if the bike's got 30,000 miles on, it's time for some suspension work. The front's going to be all sacked out and low. The back's not riding well or bottoming out. The passenger is getting beat up continually, and it's time to go through it. And a person can save a lot of money by freshening up an old bike. They'll put bling on it, they'll do this and that, but suspension gets overlooked all the time. And there's a lot of work that can be done with suspension without spending a lot of money and then making your old ride new again.
I'm guilty of that myself. I lowered my bike, and now I've got it kind of bottoming out. I did it just for looks. So
A glutton for,
I think we're all guilty of that at one point or another.
But yeah, I just took my stock shocks and put the lowering kit on it, and I know they're worn out, but it was cheap at the time. Let's just get it done, and I am paying the price now.
Yeah. And suspension wears out very slowly over time, so the owner doesn't realize, one Saturday morning, like, wait a minute, something's really different here. And that's the hard part, is it's happens slowly, and it's not visual like a tire or a brake pad.
Then you get people like me. I bought my bike with 30,000 miles on it, so I didn't know what it rode like when it was brand new. And now I've got 35 or 36 on it. It's just like, okay, I don't know what I'm missing out here, what the difference is.
Yeah, and those are the people that we need to get to. They bought the bike. They're entering the bike market secondhand. They've got a motorcycle that's 70 years old. It's affordable, but that bike is going to need suspension.
And they just don't realize it. They just once they experience it, they're really gonna know the difference. Just like that.
We hear a lot of that. Like, oh man, I should have done this a long time ago. When they finally make a change.
Yeah, and the other thing I keep trying to talk to our customers about is maybe you should upgrade your shocks. So, well, I'm just not getting the tire life I should be getting. It's like, why don't you try upgrading your shocks? And like, it has nothing to do with the tire. And like, it actually does play a big part in it.
Sure.
And they just don't want to believe it. It's like it really does. I'm not just trying to
blow smoke, but I mean, it's something people take a look at.
It compounds. The tire's got to stay on the road, and when it's not on the road, it's probably wearing, and you start getting the hop effect, and it's going to start compounding, and then you got flat spots starting, and you're going to wipe out $150 tire way too soon.
Yeah. The number one way customers can tell a shock is just done is when the bike starts bottoming out excessively. Even with great suspension adjusted properly, we're going to hit a bump big enough to bottom the bike out now and then. But if everything seems to make the bike bottom out, then that's telling you that it's time. And most of our riders have one motorcycle. So that one motorcycle is normal in their world. So no matter how good or bad the bike rides, you're an example, you bought a used bike that, probably was ready for some help. But that's normal in your world because that's the bike you ride. So
That makes sense.
Yeah, another thing to think about.
So I see you guys have brought some product in here. Let's take a look at what we have here. Walk us through what you brought down.
We've got a set of 444s. One's a 430, one's a 444. Basic difference is the price point difference. They're both lifetime warranties. They're both higher end shocks for the back of any Dyna or Sportster or a Bagger, more so on a Bagger. This one isn't a steel body, so it's a little more. It's more price point, you might say. It still has the good stuff on the inside as far as internal valving and deflective disc, valving and stuff like that. This one is going to be our best riding 13-inch bagger type shock. So if you've got a touring bike with a tour pack, stock height, this is going to be this will be one of the best ones that I think we can offer you.
So outside of the lifetime warranty that comes with these shocks, I guess the biggest question that anybody looking at upgrading their suspension is going to say, okay, why do I want to shell out the $400 or $500 up to $1,000 for progressive suspension versus the eBay knockoff? What would you guys say to that?
That's a good question. And there's a lot of stuff out there that looks like good stuff. There's certainly some, kind of blatant knockoffs of stuff. Or just, shocks that are really cool looking, with a piggyback reservoir on them that have, questionable internals. When you buy a good shock, you're going to get the performance out of it, and you're going to get the long life out of it. OEM shocks on these bikes have a 10 to maybe 20,000 mile life. Our more basic shock, which we don't have on the table here, should be a 60,000 mile shock. Better shocks like this should run past 100,000 easily. You can't visually look at something and say that's going to last longer. It really comes down to, what's inside, the type of seals that are used, and the type of construction and the tolerances that are held in manufacturing. The main reason, I guess, to even like looking at our line to move up from a $300 to a $500 or $600 shock is going to be better damping, better construction. You get into lifetime warranties with most of our higher end products, and better adjustment. These shocks, most of the better ones feature a threaded preload adjuster. You can grab that with your hand when it's on the bike and turn it, and you don't need any tools. It also has a wide range of adjustment compared to like cam adjusters on more basic shocks. So it's there's a number of reasons to move up. Better ride handling, warranty, and adjustability. Also, depending on how the bike is used, a lot of these bikes are, maybe 50-50 between 1 up and 2 up, and then there's a couple trips a year where the bike is camping gear and everything else loaded on it. The better shocks with more adjustment are going to make it easier to set the bike up to ride really nice, all the time.
As far as setting the bike up, I know that's one thing that we were talking upstairs in the conference and seminars today. When somebody's setting up a shock, what steps do they need to do to make sure it's properly set up?
We want to do a proper preload adjustment, and what we're doing is setting sag, and a lot of those terms kind of all get thrown around in the same way, but there's a certain amount of travel in any, say, rear suspension, and we want that rear suspension to sag a certain amount with the weight of the bike and the rider or riders on it. And what we're essentially doing is setting that suspension so that the wheel is going to have up and down travel. Most people think about, going over bumps and the shock compressing, but they don't necessarily think about when you hit a hole and the wheel extends and drops down into the hole. They're equally as important. When you hit a bump, if the shock can't travel up, the whole bike comes up. When you hit a hole, if the wheel can't drop down, the whole bike goes down. It's think of a hardtail. You're going to get every bit of input from the road is going to be in the chassis of the bike moving up and down if the suspension doesn't work. We want to have about 1/3 of the travel as sag. So if we have 3 inches of travel, we want that shock to sag about 1 inch when it's when the bike is loaded. If the bike sits too far down into the travel, it's going to be too close to the bottom. Starting out, and bumps are going to make it bottom. If it doesn't sag enough, It won't have that down travel we want, and the bike essentially is going to fall into holes when we encounter holes. So setting that is crucial. Whether it's stock suspension or ours or any other brand, setup is going to make it or break it. You can buy our best shock and have it poorly adjusted, and you're going to get a poor ride. So that's a big one, and that's our number one tech call, is customers looking for help because
Doesn't ride right.
Doesn't ride right. They take a brand new shock out of the box, put it on the bike, and they're a good sized rider, and they get on the bike and take off down the road, and it's bottoming out. And in their world, bottoming out usually means worn out or broke or something, and it's, hey, wait a minute, I just spent a lot of money on these.
Since you brought up tech calls, one of the things we tend to get is, question is, does the shock come set up for the particular bike already? We always say no, that you should adjust it.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay.
Progressive sells or packages all the shocks on their softest setting.
Okay.
For one, on the way together, that's just the best place to start, because you have no way of knowing what the guy's going to weigh. We know what motorcycle it's going on, but we don't know what kind of accessories he's got on it and things like that. So we always start at the bottom, and then he's touching on the 1/3 sag adjustment. That holds so true on any bike, every bike, if it's a 14-inch shock or if it's a 10-inch shock. 1/3 of that travel needs to be taken up while the rider and its weight or baggage or whatever is on the motorcycle. So you need to establish that. It doesn't matter what bike it is. It's just to really.
Right.
So just to make it super simple, essentially sit on the bike, have your buddy, your girlfriend, wife, whatever, mark out where 1 inch or 1/3 of the travel's at, and set it there, and you're good to go.
Right. And the important thing is we need to have an idea what the travel is. If you put a real short shock on a motorcycle, you're reducing travel. So you may only have 1.5 inches of travel. So the 1/3 becomes a 1/2 inch. So we only want a certain amount of sag. So, you may need some help deciding how much travel your bike has so you can get that target to go for, when you're setting it up.
Yeah.
Most motorcycles leave the dealership brand new without ever being set up or adjusted, and it's a shame because we're not giving that new bike buyer necessarily the best experience if the dealer lets them out the door like that.
It's more customizing his bike to the rider, and that's just so much of the work that we do is making the bike fit the rider. And we have so many products that do that. I mean, it's the front and it's the back. I mean, whether it's a lowering kit to lower the front as well as the back. Everybody wants to lower the back because they feel the bike is top heavy. Well, actually, if you lower the front, your center of gravity gets changed quite a bit more by lowering the front. So it makes the bike feel lighter by lowering the front 1 inch. It's just amazing compared to the back.
Makes sense. So as far as, I know you guys have the lifetime warranty on some of the upper products, how easy or to walk us through the warranty work or claiming it?
It's really simple and it's easy. You need to keep your original receipt. That's all it's to it. There's no registering, there's no going online, filling out any questionnaires. You're not going to get anything in the mail. Just hold on to that receipt. That's just crucial.
Yeah, anything that needs to be inspected for warranty, the customer can call and get an authorization number, return the product to us. We understand that none of us want to be without our motorcycle any longer than we have to be. We will return ship at our expense the product the same way it comes in, meaning if you're kind of in a time crunch and you'd like that turned around quick, first of all, it's a 1 or 2 day turnaround in most cases from when it arrives and when we ship it back out. But if you send it to us second day air, we'll send it back to you second day air.
Oh, nice.
If you send it in ground, it goes back ground. So, we try to, basically we're splitting the shipping with you. And, if you're in a hurry and want to step up and pay for some expedited shipping, we'll match it for you.
Very cool.
The lifetime warranty products are top to bottom, so the spring, the damper, the adjuster, and so on. If you did send, our warranty rate is extremely low, but if you did send something back and one damper was out of spec or leaked or something, you're going to get a pair of new ones back. We're not going to replace. We wouldn't ask you to put one shock on your bike, and we're not going to do that to you.
So cool, simple enough. Well, Thank you so much,
okay,
John, Dave. Thank you much. We appreciate
you
it.
very much.
And if you guys want any Progressive suspension products, be sure to check out Dennis Kirk because we ship the same day you order it. Cool.
Thanks.
Simple as that.
All right.
Not too painful, I hope.
No.
So, yeah.
Hope you didn't
John was making fun of me
edit
because
the
I asked
bad
him
spots.
about if they made any of their piggyback products because I want the cosmetics of it more than anything else.
No, I was making fun of you. It's I understand. It's not everybody. You want that look, but you don't want to spend
$1,000 on it when the bike's not
We're
worth.
making that shock now in all black for Dynas because cosmetics are such a big thing, and guys
Yep.
are like, I need all black. I need all black. That 430 Dave has, we do the contrast cut.
Mm-hmm.
When we came out with this is a 444. When this replaced the 440, they had a black one and it had all this stuff was all detailed, cut like that. And I stopped and I said, you have to give me one of our better shocks all black, because I'll have a customer that wants a good shock
Is this like
But
the
wants it that
Harley
color.
replacement cartridge?
that,
For-
that just
for
needs all
Medina.
black.
What was it?
And that's what the new baggers are going to get. So it's going to have a damper on one side and a spring on the other.
Yeah, but that's the 49 millimeter Dyna, and you can see how big that damper is.
One of our big questions is why should I buy this $900 shock when you can get the 412 or something like that?
Yeah.
At the entry level.
Right. So it comes down to the damper. We didn't get too technical into the. Are you guys going to be up there later today?
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't get too much into the. The 412 is a twin tube type damper. Gas charge, that's a step up from stock. When you move into like these models, these are what's called monotubes. So they're single wall construction. It has a bigger piston in it, and they use completely. You'll see in the cutaways inside. None of our shocks look like any other model. Like the 412 is 412 inside. 430 is all 430 components. The 444 has all of its own internal
I guess for us
components.
the big problem is with customers is explain to them
Yeah.
what makes a $250 shock versus a $900
Yeah,
shock.
their reason to move up is going to be better adjustment, better warranty, an overall better ride,
Better performance.
better performance. The 412 has a little cam adjuster, and it's a nice shock. It's a step up from stock. It's a good shock all the way around. It's going to last about 3 times longer. The reason to move up to something maybe with a threaded adjuster is, hey, I weigh 220. I've got a passenger half the time. The 412 isn't going to have enough adjustment where, the heavy spring is going to be probably too heavy for that rider solo, but the standard spring, even turned all the way up, isn't going to carry both of them. So now you've got a shock that really won't do the job they need. So that's a reason to move up to something with a threaded adjuster that has twice the range.
See, and that leads
And it's
right
a
into
better
the second question for us that we get is, what's the advantage of the standard duty versus your heavy duty?
It's
'cause,
spring rate.
And it's 50-50
And they're all-
versus how often they ride 2-up. If a guy says he rides 50% 2-up, 50% solo, do you bump him to the heavy duty or do you keep him on the
It
standard?
really depends on the weight and which shock. Again, first of all, the standard duty spring doesn't go from here to here and stop, and then heavy duty starts and goes here.
Right. See, I think that's
so
what
with
they think is
right. So with that threaded adjuster, the spring rates are like this.
Mhm.
So the top of the adjustment with the standard is going to overlap the bottom with the heavy duty.
Okay.
So it's not like you have here and here. It's more like they overlap each other.
So rule of
And it-
thumb, would
and
you
it
automatically
kinda-
jump them to heavy duty
It-
if they're
It,
50-50?
right, if they're 50-50, and that's a great question because, I told some of the earlier groups, this is really easy to figure out when they ride the bike the same way 80 or 90% of the time.
Right.
If I'm 80%, 90% solo, or I'm 90% 2-up, it's a no-brainer.
It seems that everybody
and now,
says 50-50.
right, so now when you get the 50-50, and, a lot of riders probably are, half the time with a passenger, 50-50, now we got to take a harder look at what's the rider weigh,
Mm-hmm.
and
And you hate asking a
and-
customer that.
Why do it? What do you weigh?
well, no, you just tell them. I mean,
What's what's the combined rider weight?
well, and that's
mean average here.
yeah. The hard thing is when you have the rider and the passenger standing there, and you have to
Mhm. Face to face.
figure it out.
It's
But
easier, yeah, you're right. It's easier over the phone. What do
and
you weigh?
and I just tell them right up front. I know every passenger weighs exactly 100. So whatever the other difference is, you're going to have to eat
You're
it.
gonna have to make it up.
So, but we want to look hard at the 50-50 is the tough one. we want to look hard at the rider weight. Is the rider 180, 200, 220, or if the rider's like 250, then it's a no-brainer. We're into this heavy spring, just solo. It's when the rider is, pushing that high end of the standard spring envelope, so to speak, and then, is the passenger 100, 120 or 170, 180? You can start getting into a tough mix of single and two up.
That's when I start throwing up spring rates and stuff like that, and go, you have to make this decision. I
Yeah.
can't make it.
Well, we can help you, and we've had good luck. Trying to work that out. Once in a while, you'll get someone that you steer the wrong way for one reason or another, something they told you, and a lot of times it's the customer is almost always going to be pushing for heavy duty. The customer could weigh 155 and be like, I ride really fast and I got to have the heavy duty, and all they're going to get is like a set of struts when they're by themselves.
Right.
They're seeing the heavy duty and thinking that means better construction.
I get more, right.
But it's not the case.
And it should have been standard spring, heavy spring
Right.
designation a long time ago, I think. We can, and you have to keep in mind that the buyer is going to push for heavy duty all the time. The other thing,
get more value.
right? I'm getting something for free here. The other thing that they do is when they adjust shocks, it's like, well, if I need this much preload,
Big swings.
3 more turns is probably going to be even better, and I might as well, what the heck, let's just go to the end.
And then you're not using shock.
Right, it just becomes a bad riding piece.
I feel a tour pack is part of the equation all the time too. And I ask that question. That's 1/3 of the equation.
You have to ask them if
it's
they haul a
easy to send the
trailer.
load, and they're going to pack the shit out of it, and it's behind that axle.
Yep.
And do you tow a trailer? You'd be surprised once in a while. It's like, oh, I always tow a trailer. I don't ever leave home without it. It's like,
It's
like-
We try and make the best decision for the people, or help them make the best decision, right? But it still comes down to when they install it, and they got to get the preload set.
Yeah.
If it's not right, then stop. Now, if we got something odd that's falling to the ground or it's not moving, now at this point we can still maybe do something. Don't ride it for 300 miles and get it all greasy, and
Yeah.
But we got to get that across to them somehow.
and that is the, when we're dealing with customers at rallies and so on, we just tell them, I want you to, I'm going to choose this spring, and if they're still like don't take a guess at my bike, it's like, listen, when I set this up, I'll know right away. If I choose the standard spring and I got to run that adjustment right to the end to get it to sit, I know I made the wrong call and put the heavy spring on there. Or same thing, if you put the heavy spring on there and you can't get it to sag and you've got 0 preload on it, then you went the wrong way.
Percentage-wise, overall, do you think we did 3/4 standards, or what's your ratio?
I don't even know. That's a tough call. I don't even never really even paid attention to see which way it.
It's all about the initial sag, bang, right away. As soon as you put them on, you should know if this is correct or not.
Okay.
If we could figure out how we could tell customers how to look at that, and if he calls you back a half an hour after receiving them and they're brand
I think
new,
155.
You're right.
nobody has a problem probably doing an exchange because they made a wrong decision, right?
I don't
But
think so.
but if they screw them up, they take them on, they ride for the weekend, and they're all screwed up and dirty.
Well, yeah, we'll tell them, the ones that look new and we can resell them, you should be able to return them to us.
It's all about the preload. It's
You
all
know,
about the sag.
but we got, if they come back scratched or whatnot, you own them. So,
Now, in our seminar that's coming up that we're going to be taking, are we going to be talking about that new touring shock that you have, that 12, 13 shock?
Yeah,
944,
yep, 944.
I don't know what happened or why we don't.
Yeah, it's all
have
right.
one.
We have it in the video, and that's a really cool
I
piece.
know a lot of
That's
people are talking about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
This is
They have a lot of questions.
it's the same damper as the 444.
Okay.
So this is our aluminum body damper with the FST valving, all the top of the line stuff, and we've taken the spring, and instead of a standard spring, which even at 0 preload, this spring is probably this long if I unclipped it.
Yeah.
That shock has a spring that, the free length is probably this long,
Okay.
and then we use a compensating spring on top of it, which is a real light, flat wire spring. And essentially what we have is we have a shock that has no preload, no initial preload on it. When we put this on the bike and set it down, it's going to sink deeper down into the travel intentionally. So it gives us a lower ride height.
Okay.
We still have threaded adjustment, but it sits deeper. You take your normal 12-inch length shock that gives you that ride height on a bagger has 2 inches of travel. So we set the bike on the ground and put people on it, and you've got 1 1/4 and 3/4 inch bump and rebound. This shock with 3 inches of travel, it's going to sit down there at that height, inch of bump travel, but 2 inches of rebound, and you still have 3 as you go down the road. And that that 2 inches on rebound really helps. You hit a hole, it can drop that wheel down, and now you got 3 inches on the compression side.
I see.
Okay, that's in a nutshell. That's the best riding low shock for a dresser. A regular 13-inch like 444 will still ride a little bit better because it has when you have ride height, you have bump travel, and that's an increase in bump travel is going to give you a little better ride. But that 944 compared to a 12-inch anything, really has a great ride advantage. Another thing that we try to get people to understand is, especially with that one, don't worry about how long. Guys will buy that and put a tape measure on it. This thing's 13 inches. It's like, we know, we know. Put it on the bike, set it on the ground, and tell me how long it is. Dave had one Sunday at the event we did.
He was willing to bet.
Yeah, he just couldn't. There's no way, and he had 11.5s on his bike. And this is a good point. I try to get people to don't be worried about how long the shock is in the box. Let's be worried about how long it is on the bike.
Right.
Put that 944 on the ground, and it sits at 11.5 or a little above. You put the rider on, and it's at like 11.25. The shortest shock we make for a dresser is an 11.5. It's got 1.5 inches of travel, so you have to set that up to sit with the shock about 11 inches.
So we ended up lower than the 11.5-inch 412 that he had to have so jacked up because he put 11.5 412 on a bagger.
Yeah.
So,
and it didn't move. He sat on it. It's like,
so he had a shock that had 1.5 inches of total travel, and should have sat at 11, but they end up turning the preload up too high, trying to fix the travel issue, and so the point is you had a shock that best case scenario was 11, had 1.5 inches of travel, sitting at 11 inches. And now you have a shock sitting at 11 that has 3 inches of travel. The more you're trying to get that dresser lower, the stronger the case is to put the 944 on it. But the mistake we do see is customers look at the price of the 944 and the model number's 900 and something, not 400 and something. So it's just got to be the best.
Right.
And you got an ultra limited, 2-up, heavy riders, loaded. They weren't trying to lower the bike, but they bought that one, and they shouldn't. In a lot of cases, shouldn't have. They should have bought a. Right, you should have bought a 13-inch 444.
Okay. So just because it is a higher number doesn't mean it's a better shock for your application.
Right, and that's that's a tough call because in most cases our line has been that way: 412, 430, 444.
And I've said that to customers.
Yeah.
I said the higher the number, the better the shock.
And that one's a little exception now because that 900 series doesn't always make it the best choice.
Okay.
Well, if they ask for recommendation, the first thing they say, do you need to lower your bike? Not do you want to, do you need to? And they say no, and I say good. They're always going to be happier.
Just because you're not running with that much ride height of ow, ow, ow.
Yeah.
Every time you hit a bump,
Yeah.
bottoming it out. So I guess the one thing I really took out of this was there's a lot of tech behind the shocks. I guess I didn't realize, and I guess what I'm taking out of this is you could have the world's best shock, but if it's not properly set up, it's going to be a step above worthless.
Right, and there is a lot of further inside the shock stuff that you don't really think about, and we don't really tell the story. Just if you took whatever model shock, a certain length, 12-inch long, 430. We don't just have that one 12-inch 430 damper. We'll have 25 different valve tunes in 12-inch dampers depending where that shock is going to go. Is it going on a Sportster or a Dyna or a Honda VTX or whatever? So there's even more in the tuning of the valving and each shock and
Because
the
I've gotten that
spring
question
rates.
before too. Well, if it's 412 shock that's 13 inches, that Sportster shock should work on my dresser too.
Right.
And it's like,
And-
well, why would you do that? They're the same price.
Right, and
Get the one that
that's
fits your bike.
another good point is it's 13 inches, but it stops at some point.
Right.
So the 13 that goes on a dresser might go all the way down to 9.5 before it stops. And on a dresser, it has to stop at 10. So you put the Sportster shock on the dresser, and you hit a big bump, and the tire comes up, and it cleans all the wiring harness out of the fender.
You have a bad day.
Yeah.
And as it's doing that, the dash shorts out, and we've seen all this stuff, and it's like all other kinds of crazy stuff happens, and the rider's like, "What just happened to my bike?" And it's like, yeah, that's why you can't do that.
Your shocks made my dash go.
Yeah.
Different bikes have different spring rates. This is a Dynashock. You can tell a lot of times just looking at the wire diameter, but this is a 210, 250 rate. This fits a Dyna. A dresser shock, this is probably a dresser one. This is a heavy duty dresser shock. It's 115, 150.
Now, what does that actual that?
That's the rate. So the initial rate on this is 115, and it progresses to 155.
You can see it better on this. Like through here is your softer area of the
Right.
of the
Okay.
spring, and that goes to this.
So it compresses to 115 first, and then.
Yep.
Right, and this is 210, 250. So if I took that spring out of there and compressed it 1 inch, it would take 210 pounds. And then every inch would take an additional some number
okay.
about. So it'd take 210, and then it might take 215 to go one more, another 215 to go another inch, and then it might take
Another.
220 to go on top of that.
Okay.
So it keeps
That's how that
increasing.
works.
Right. So on
Nice.
small bumps, we start out with the softer rate, and then when you hit a big bump, the rate increases.
All the way up to 600 or whatever the max
Right.
Progressive
pounds is.
suspension.
What's
Yeah.
that?
Hence the progressive suspension.
Properly named.
Yes.
Kudos.
So
And then on that Dyna, why it takes such a big spring, and it's where the shock is mounted now, in relationship to the rear axle.
Because it's in,
Or like on your
underneath the
V-Rod, it's like this now, and all of a sudden that changes stuff, where your V-Rod's probably going to stick a lot heavier type of spring.
Well, that brings up a good
no, the
point.
Dyna's the Dyna is
It's
the,
heavy, not- it's-
is the heavy spring of all the newer bikes.
There's
V-Rod
there's two
is
things, it's where it's mounted on top and where it's mounted to
Yeah.
in relation to the rear
It's-
axle.
it's-
Well, that
Right.
brings up a great
The
point. of
V-Rod's
people
probably
using
behind the
lowering
rear
blocks.
axle, but at an angle.
right.
Yeah.
So it's just.
And we
each
sell
one's
blocks
different.
in the Burley brand,
Yep.
and it's an okay way to lower a bike. It's the $100
Yeah, the
way to
cheapy
lower
way.
your bike.
Well, how about
but
this? If
you
somebody's
ch-
using lowering blocks, does that affect their warranty at all on their shocks?
I don't know if we've ever
No, it
turned
might on the
stuff.
bike because now when you lowered it, you moved the shock at an angle.
Yeah.
And then now the shock is not stopping in the proper spot.
Yep.
You much greater risk of your tire hitting up on top of your fender now.
Yep.
Yeah,
So-
there's some of the. I don't even know what the brand name is. I'll just say they're probably.
Brand X.
Oh no, I don't know the name, but there's like a lowering block for dressers that has 3 holes in it.
Oh, really?
So you have, and here's the stock location. Then you have 1, 2, 3, and on the first location, it'll lower the bike a little. On the second one, it lowers it a little more. On the third one, I have riders all the time. Oh yeah, if you put it on the third one, the tire hits the fender. I've had numerous people tell me that and this thing, these have no name. There's not an initial stamped in them anywhere.
I
There's,
was that guy. I bought them. I put them on
Yeah.
before I worked here.
Yeah.
I went to the first notch. This had enough sense. I went to the first notch and stopped. I thought this is going to be bad if you start doing this.
but
I've had people say, I want the 11-inch shock for my bagger, and then tell me that lowering block too. I'm like,
right. Oh yeah.
well, do you want to keep your tire under your
I
bike?
have customers that swear they have 9-inch shocks with blocks on their bikes, and it's
Yeah.
like,
No, you don't.
Then you don't have a fender on your bike.
right. And so we hear all kinds of crazy stuff. But yeah, you're really, most of my experience with blocks is taking them off bikes for customers,
Right.
and we do it. We carry hardware with us because a lot of those block kits, you throw 2 of the shock bolts away, and then they use like a real long bolt. And then when you want to put a regular shock back on the bike, you need hardware. So we carry it with us all the time. They are what they are. They're an okay way to lower a bike. Maybe if you don't ride a lot of miles and that's the budget that you want to be in or whatever and all that. But
But then again, the guys are just slamming their bikes down probably aren't putting 1,000 miles on
Well,
their bikes today.
some do, some don't. We hear the I want to slam my bike way down low and make it ride real good, and it's like
Yeah,
it's kind
I
of
get that with seats all the time. I want the low seat, but I want to be comfortable so I can drive from here to Sturgis.
yeah.
Two totally different things.
Yeah, right, and that's exactly the same. We deal with it, and there's a great compromise. We can lower a bike while putting a better shock on it and have a win-win. The bike's lower and it rides better. The danger is what's the shortest shock you make for my bike, and my wife and I are riding two up. We're going to,
150 pounds.
tour the four corners of the U.S. this year or something. So, different choices for
So we
different
can
riders.
deal with lowering an inch and still retain ride, but then after that, something's got to give.
Yeah.
Okay.
Real, makes sense.
Real quick, 13 inches a long shock for a dresser. Sits at 12. 11 and a half is a super short shock for a dresser, sits at 11. Right, so all of this back and forth is a difference of your bike being this much higher or lower.
Yeah.
And there's a ride difference with a longer shock that just makes it work so good. But you can put a 12 or 12 and a half on a bike and still retain a fair amount of travel. But it just customers picture it. Long shock to short shock is about a foot. In reality, it's an inch of where the bike sits.
And like I tell a lot of our customers too, is when you're talking the difference of going from a 13 to an 11-inch shock, maybe you should think about your seat height, your seat width. Maybe there's other
and that's
things to start looking at
right.
besides just getting that bike on the
And
ground so you can be flat-footed.
Right. It does get obviously more expensive if you're going to spend $500 or $600 on shocks and a seat is $350 or $450 and but that's an excellent point too. I would, as much as we like selling shocks, I'd rather see the customer lower the bike a little bit with the shock and then an inch with the seat.
Yeah. Sometimes just narrowing the seat up and get
Sure.
your feet down faster.
But there are all those people that don't do it so they're more stable. They just do it because it looks
Because it
cool.
looks cool.
Oh yeah. I get
That guy.
I get those guys that are like super tall. Like I need to lower my street glide a lot, and it's like. It's like you're going to be able to kneel on the ground.
It's going to be like a trike,
Yeah.
a tricycle.
I lowered it 2 inches front and rear, and
Feet low.
she's low. He can touch the ground.
I can finally touch the ground on it.
Well, we better let you guys get back
Yeah.
up there for the next seminar. So.
Thanks.
Thanks again, John and
Thank you.
Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
I think I can get one. I don't know.